Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of the Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Hey, flower friends, welcome back to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. Today, we're incredibly fortunate to have Hannah Muller with us, the visionary farmer and florist from the heart of Northern California's Capay Valley. Born and raised on the vibrant Full Belly farm, Hannah's family not only cultivates on over 350 acres of certified organic fruits, vegetables, and flowers, but Hannah also brings these elements of nature into homes in a lasting way through her stunning dried flower arrangements. In her newly released book, Designing with Dried Flowers, Hannah invites us into her world with 32 unique arrangements that capture the enduring beauty of dried flowers. From everyday wreaths to breathtaking celebration pieces, she teaches us not just to appreciate the aesthetic of dried flowers, but to craft them ourselves from all sources, whether a backyard garden or a simple supermarket bouquet. Today, Hannah will be sharing her insights on preserving the fleeting beauty of flowers into something permanent and the joy of connecting people to the earth through her work. So get ready to be inspired by a true pioneer who transforms cut flowers into an everlasting beauty. Hannah, welcome to the podcast. We're so thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you so much. You make me sound so official.
Well, you are. You just released a book. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It's been such an amazing journey. I have been dreaming about writing this book for such a long time, and I got to hold the copy in my hand for the first time, and it was unbelievable, that feeling.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about your book. And your book is coming out, I believe, the same time that this podcast is launching on June 4th.
Yes, June 4th is the official release date.
So tell us, how did you get your start with dried flowers?
Well, like you said, I grew up at Full Belly Farm. My mom has been growing flowers for all 40 years that Full Belly Farm has been growing. But it started very small, just a small little backyard garden that she has grown over the course of the last 40 years. So now we grow about 15 acres of cut flowers. And the dried flowers sort of happened naturally as we grew more flowers. We had a little bit of extra to try drying, and we tried dabbling in things that we grew specifically for drying. We just created a little shed in the back of our farm, and we used that space to dry. And it's always been my favorite spot. On the farm, I've from a young age found myself sort of wandering into that space. It's a little bit like my cathedral, and it's a beautiful spot, and that's sort of how I got started. I think I made my first wreath when I was about 6 years old or 5 years old. So it's been in my blood for a long time.
That's incredible. So it truly is in your blood. You have been around flowers your entire life.
Yeah, for all of those moms that are raising kids in the flowers, just know that it rubs off on your kids, definitely.
Well, I have a 9-year-old and I always wonder, I'm like, is she going to grow up hating flowers or is she going to grow up loving them? And I hope it's the later.
Yeah, there was definitely a little bit of the angsty teenage years where I didn't think I wanted anything to do with Full Belly. But as soon as I went away, actually to Oregon, I realized that what we have here is really, really unique and really special. And I missed it incredibly. And so I decided to come back.
What were you doing up in Oregon?
I was going to school and studying sociology and anthropology, but I really fell in love with the student farm there. It's a really unique place. It also happened to coincide with the sort of same time that a lot of the slow flower movement was just beginning. And I remember picking up a book called, I think, The 50-Mile Bouquet
Yes.
by Deborah Prinzing. And it was a very transformative book for me because it was just reminding me that like there are amazing people growing flowers in all different ways. And it was a very inspirational moment where I kind of took a look at our farm and also what I wanted to do, and realized that there was some beautiful coexistence that could happen with arranging flowers and the flowers that we were already growing, mostly for wholesale at that point.
So you grew up on the farm, left for a while, came to University of Oregon,
Yeah.
and then after college, did you immediately head back home to the farm?
I did. I was pretty angsty, and even my to get back, and even in my senior year, I had already booked about 4 or 5 weddings for like right after college. So I moved back, and I sort of jumped headfirst into the wedding industry. So that's what I was doing first. I was arranging flowers for weddings and events. I did that for about 6 years, and I was doing weddings in all of Northern California, the Bay Area, and on our farm as well. And it kind of burnt me out, to be honest. I feel like the wedding industry is a really beautiful and awe-inspiring place, but also one that is uh, you need to be fully present and in love with it, or else you get tired of it real quick.
Yes, I was a wedding photographer, which is how I
Yeah.
found flowers. And now I provide DIY buckets for bride and grooms and couples. And
Yeah.
I also wholesale my flowers. But that was part of my shift, is stepping away from the wedding photography into flowers, because you're on, if they book you 9 months in advance, you're getting emails for 9 months
Exactly.
from that couple. It's not a one and done delivery.
Exactly, and I was realizing that I wanted more of my day to day to be in the flowers rather than the consultations leading up to it.
How did you start doing the wedding flowers? Was that something your farm and your family was already offering, or did you start that yourself?
It was a pretty sweet deal because my brother and his wife had a catering company that was using our produce that we used at the farm, or that we grew at the farm. And we just sort of decided to start offering flowers for events as well. So they were, suggesting that folks use my flowers. And then we have a pretty good brand recognition just because we've been growing for 40 years. So we just announced that we were doing flowers for weddings and events. And it's always been something that people have been interested in getting, our flowers that are usually for CSA or for farmers markets. But people have been requesting wedding design, but we've never really dabbled in it. So that was something that I wanted to do. And that's sort of how it got started. And it just sort of, snowballed from there. I think so much of the wedding industry, as you probably know, is word of mouth. So as soon as I was getting referrals, just more and more business came my way.
That's so true. Word of mouth is
Yeah.
so crucial in the wedding industry. If you do a good job for someone, you're going to get 10 more
Exactly.
referrals.
Exactly.
So, how many years did you do weddings, or are you still doing weddings?
So I did them until COVID. I was doing that sort of exclusively, and I was doing about 35 weddings a year, and then which included some DIY buckets of flowers, and then also some events, doing some nonprofit event work and things like that. But yeah, I was doing that up until COVID, and then I'm sure you're aware the COVID sort of just really brought the wedding industry to a grinding halt, and so I had a moment of just like all 30 of my weddings got canceled
Oh,
within a couple of weeks, and it was a really like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? And luckily, my business is sort of under the umbrella of Full Belly Farm, so I had a business to fall back on, but also I could sort of continue to work with flowers, which was really great. So I've been doing more of the day-to-day harvesting, arranging, and the bouquets for our farmers markets and our wholesale customers. And then we have 6 weddings here that we host at our farm a year. And so I've been still doing the wedding design for that, but I'm no longer currently taking on outside weddings. And that's for a lot of reasons. I feel like from a sustainability standpoint, just driving so much was getting really expensive and taxing. And then also just I was definitely burnt out and I needed a little break. And I have a feeling I'll come back to it. I really love weddings, but I've been really happy with just scaling back for a little bit. And it came at a great time because I was writing a book.
So when did you start writing this book, or how did the book come to be? Did you all of a sudden one day wake up and say, I'm going to write a book on dried flowers?
Yeah, I think that I've had this dream to write about our wreath room, which is what we call the room that we dry our flowers, for probably 6 or 7 years. And I even wrote some of the first chapters of it and some of my ideas down at that time. And then it became more of a dream and a little bit of a, this will never happen. And then I actually went to the Slow Flowers meetup at Filoli Gardens 3 years ago, I guess that would have been. And I met an agent who has been really wonderful, and she helped me create a proposal. And it was a very serendipitous moment because she was looking for someone to write book about dried flowers, and I had always wanted to write this book. So and then it kind of naturally fell from there. I mean, we wrote a proposal, it got accepted by Clarkson Potter, which they've been wonderful. And then we've been working with a wonderful photographer based out of San Francisco for the book. So it's been a really, really great process. And I was so scared entering into it. You have so many ideas of what writing sort of author industry, this whole thing where you have these idea that this editor is hounding you for pages. And I think it's mostly movies, but it's been such a seamless, beautiful process throughout the whole thing.
So from start to finish, how many years have you been working on this book?
We started the proposal in that would have been 2021, I believe. 2021, I think, or 2022.
So it's been a multi-year.
Multi-year. I'll have to look back on that. I'll send you the actual dates.
I bet it's all blended together and sort of been a blur, because I know that so much goes into writing a book. It's not just taking some beautiful pictures and putting a recipe for your photos on it.
Yeah, and I really wanted it to be a personal sort of memoir in a lot of ways, because just growing up at the farm, I felt like I had a lot of wonderful stories to tell. And I also wanted to do my mother's work and her legacy that she sort of left behind. I mean, she's still here, but left for us. I just wanted to do it justice. And so I took the writing process really seriously and wrote everything. And I'm very happy with how it turned out. So even the introductions to the different, arrangements are all very personal and tell a really great story about growing up on a farm.
Can you share one of those stories with us, or give us a glimpse into one of the stories in your book?
Yeah, one of my favorite arrangements is it's a mix of fresh flowers and dried flowers, so sort of showing how you can incorporate fresh and dried together. And it's a arrangement out in the middle of our flower fields that I kind of am calling the flower fairy fete table. So it's a little bit of a take on one of my childhood favorite activities was to create flower fairy picnics and extravaganzas in my mom's garden. So it's definitely, I tried to bring a lot of that joy and playful energy into the book as well.
Oh, I love that. So the farm has been around for over 40 years. Has there always been flowers on the farm?
There has been, but again, it was probably a quarter of an acre, maybe even less to begin with. And it was just my mom trialing things, learning that, Iris can be really finicky, and sweet peas are beautiful but need trellising, and snapdragons will bend if you don't stake them. So there's a lot of trial and error that went into probably the first 15, 20 years, to be honest. And then slowly it's ramped up. As I'm the youngest of four, so she was also taking care of four kids. And so as her kids grew, I think her garden grew a little bit each year. So it's been slowly moving forward and getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. We grow about 15 acres of cut flowers now. They're all outside, and that's not, all 15 acres all the time. It's about five acres of spring flowers, 5 acres of summer flowers, and then 5 acres of fall flowers as well.
Even dividing it by the seasons, just 5 acres is a lot of flowers.
It's a lot of flowers, and it's beautiful. We maybe overplant because we know that we love to dry flowers, and we love pollinators, and we just want to attract as many beneficials to our farm as possible. So we know that some will not get harvested, some will get harvested for drying, and then we will harvest as much as we possibly can. And we're really fortunate to have a lot of acreage. Other folks are, working with a lot of smaller scale. So we're constantly sort of rotating where our flowers are grown at our farm. And we're sort of doing a lot of crop rotation and also cover crops to sort of keep the nitrogen and soil really healthy.
That's great. And what do you do with all of those flowers? Where do they go?
Yeah, where do they go? Okay, so they go mostly to Northern California, and we work with a couple of different distributing companies that send our flowers to different stores, but then also we sell directly to stores and restaurants in Sacramento and in the Bay Area and in San Francisco. And then we also go to 3 farmers markets a week, and we bring, flowers are a small thing of what we do here at the farm. So like you said, there's 350 acres. We're growing fruits and vegetables. So we have a farmers market where we sell all of the things that we grow, including flowers. And then we have a CSA, and the CSA subscription can get a add-on of a bouquet of flowers. And then we're selling, directly to stores as well, and directly to customers as well.
That's amazing. That's a lot of outlets you have, but you have so
it's
much.
A lot. Yeah, and we have so many wonderful clients that have been working with my mom and my dad and our farm for almost all 40 years. And so a lot of our local co-ops love supporting us and just have really consistent orders over the years.
That's great. Have dried flowers always been a part of the mix?
They haven't really been as big of a mix. To begin with, my mom was growing flowers, drying flowers just to have a little bit for additional, income and activities for the fall and winter. And then slowly, as she had a few more interns and folks that were interested in ramping up that production, it has grown a little bit, but I would say in the last 10 years, it's really taken on a whole new life of its own. And it's been really amazing to see it sort of progress. And I have tried my best to help it so that we're not only offering wreaths, which is what we were just offering, our beautiful wreaths, but they're very time consuming. So we now offer dried mixed bouquets and then also single varieties as well.
Do you do dried bouquets and dried flowers year round, or is it seasonal?
It's seasonal for us, and part of that is just timing. It makes sense to, only work with dried flowers when we don't have any fresh flowers. Another reason we do that is because we want to employ our employees year round. And so we look at our dried flowers as a big season extender and to keep our employees employed year round. So we have 8 women that work specifically with the flowers, and we can employ those folks year round because of the dried flower program. And it's been amazing. And I've always had this just like huge crush on dried flowers. They are such a unique way of showing everlasting sort of love. And I just love them as a gift. I love them in my home because they're so low stress and less mess. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've just always enjoyed.
That's great. Now, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that you have a recipe for a bouquet that is part dried and part fresh.
Yeah.
Can you put those dried flowers in water?
So I wouldn't recommend it generally. So this arrangement was using chicken wire as a base as kind of like a garland base, and then adding dried flowers into that, and then using a couple of vases for the fresh flowers interspersed with that.
Gotcha.
I have included dried flowers in bridal bouquets, but I like to add them the day of the wedding, and I cut their stems shorter so that they're actually not sitting in the water, because they'll start to rehydrate and they'll tend to look a little bit droopy.
Oh, I would have not thought of that. So, if someone was interested in drying flowers for the first time, what advice would you give to them? Where should they
I
start?
Yeah, I think just taking a look and an inventory at what you already are growing. So even on a small scale, if you're growing statice or dusty miller or some of these other eucalyptus, things that you might not think as dried flowers, but make really great filler and dried flowers, I would just recommend experimenting with the flowers that you're already growing and taking inventory of that. I would also recommend investing in a clothes drying rack, a wooden clothes drying rack, because it's a great way if you're just starting out to hang dry flowers. And it's, you can take it down, you can move it around. So it's a really simple way. You don't need an entire wreath room to dry flowers. You can do it very simply and in a small area in your house. So that's what I would recommend for somebody who just wants to try dabbling. And if you aren't even growing the flowers, you can also look at things that are at your local, stores, or also at your farmers markets as well. There's a lot of flowers that are used in everyday mixed bouquets that make great dried flowers, like baby's breath or statice as well.
I love drying statice. You can't
Yeah.
see where we're chatting, but to the side of me, I have a wooden clothes drying rack and it's covered in statice.
Oh, I love it. That's so great.
Yeah, it's just so great. I love making wreaths with it, and also not baby's breath. I don't grow that. Dusty Miller.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a whole tote full of it next to me. How long can you store dried flowers for?
We try to use all of our dried flower inventory the same year that we grow it and dry it, because, I mean, you can, they will last many, many years, but the rodent interest and
Mm,
also bleaching, like sun bleaching, can get a little bit, you just need to be really mindful of where you're storing them and making sure that they're staying away from mice or other interested critters. So we try to use everything the same year that we dry it, which means
okay.
we're going through a lot of product. We have 2 shipping containers that we try to jam pack full of boxes of dried flowers. And so we're taking down all of the flowers that are hanging in the wreath room and probably rehanging them about, I want to say, like 30 times.
Wow.
And then we are storing those in shipping containers. Some of the larger things like nigella or wheat, we don't put into boxes. We actually put into big like watermelon bins, like the cardboard watermelon bins, and we store them that way. So yeah, we're trying, like field mice. We're like trying to gather all of these little bits and bobs until the fall, until we're ready to use them.
That's amazing. So, if someone here is listening and doesn't have experience with dried flowers and they have a cut flower garden, do they need to plant differently to start or to start flowers that they're going to be using to dry?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I think just taking inventory of what you're growing, try drying. one of each bunch of what you're already growing and seeing if you like it. Like marigolds and ranunculus, we didn't know that those dried really beautifully until a couple of years ago. And so I think of dried flowers in two different ways. I think of things that you grow specifically for drying and things that you are already drying that you want to, already growing that you want to dry. So the things that you're growing specifically for drying might be things that like a lavender or a mobium, straw flower, holypterum, things like that, that maybe you're not interested in using as a fresh flower, but you want to just save for your dried flower sort of inventory. And then things that you already are growing for drying, like we dry actually a lot of zinnias and sunflowers. And that sort of came out of just, we had a lot of those things. And so we tried drying them and realized that they dried really beautifully and made great accents in dried mixed bouquets.
That's incredible. So you had no idea that it would work, but you gave it a shot.
Yeah. I call it dryaling.
Dryaling. I love that. That's a great term. Are there any flowers that don't dry well?
Yes. Oh, of course. Yeah. I think that even within like something like Celosia, coxcomb, you think, oh, everything's going to dry beautifully. There are certain colors that don't dry well. So yeah, definitely experimentation. I mean, my new book goes over all of the flowers that we dry. And that's 40 years of information. And it has tips for when we harvest each thing and how to sort of get the best end product. So that's a really helpful resource. I also think just like taking a look at other dried flower growers, like Charles Little and Company.
Yes.
They're a great resource. Just people that have been doing it for a really long time, because those are the folks that have tested it and know what works, what doesn't work, and what stage to harvest things at to get the best end result.
Bethany from Charles and Little, she came to the Pacific Northwest Cut Flower Growers meetup. I hope I said that correctly. It was, I think, 2 years ago that I had the chance to go, and she did a dried flower workshop there. Yeah. And that was where I saw her wooden drying rack, and I said, oh my gosh, what a great idea. And so that summer I have 4 totes sitting behind me here of dried flowers that actually they're from last summer, but I need to get them used up before they're probably too crumbly to use.
Well, there's a trick to that too, as well. So a lot of folks, I think their biggest fear is that dried flowers can be really hard to work with because they're so brittle. But
yes,
if you have a dried flower or if you have a flower cooler or even a refrigerator, we put our flowers just back into our flower cooler in the boxes. We don't put them in water or anything, but it actually helps absorb just a little bit of moisture and makes them a little easier to work with. Just for like a day or so, just putting them back in the cooler. But also, I mean, it depends on where you live. Folks living in the Pacific Northwest or somewhere where it's more humid might not have that issue. Actually, they might have the other issue, which is dried flowers being a little bit too moist and needing to let them dry out even a little bit more.
Okay. But if you have ones that are really dry and brittle,
yes,
you could put them in the cooler where there's high humidity.
Exactly.
And they'll soften up. Oh, yes. I'm going to try that because I've been wanting to make a wreath with my status. I had all the colors of the rainbow.
Oh, great. Yeah.
But it just keeps breaking on me. So maybe that will soften it enough that I can use it.
Status is one of those things that can be really tricky to work with if it's too brittle. So yeah, try putting it into the cooler or just putting a wet paper towel or like a wet towel over it for 6 hours before you use it. It will really help.
I'm going to totally try that. That's exciting.
Yeah.
What about drying the flowers? I know I've heard that there's certain places you're not supposed to dry them. What are your recommendations and advice for drying flowers?
So our room is pretty bare bones. It's nothing fancy. So if you have a garage or an outbuilding that you want to try, the thing that you need to make sure is that it's very low light. Because as soon as dried flowers start seeing light, they will start to fade. So unless you like that look, some people like the sun bleached, and that's like If that's what you're going for, actually all you would want is sun. But if you're wanting to preserve the color, which is what I have sort of tried to showcase in my book, is just all of the amazing color that you can get with dried flowers. You'll want sort of the darkest room, but also a room that has good ventilation. So if you do, want to try drying in a garage, just make sure that garage door stays open a little bit, or that there's a few windows or doors open so that there's a little bit of ventilation. That will help with the drying process. Folks that live in a more humid climate might want to try having a fan on or a dehumidifier on in that zone.
Okay. So if I want the bleached look, I could hang them in my greenhouse. But if I want to preserve the beautiful color, I need a dark space with ventilation.
Exactly. Yeah. We tried drying things in our greenhouse this year, and certain things like Nigella, we had like a green potted Nigella. It was actually really great in the greenhouse and did really well. Other things like we tried to dry safflower in the greenhouse, which generally safflower is this beautiful, vibrant green, but being exposed to so much sun really bleached it out, and I wasn't able to get that same dark, beautiful green. So just being wary of like what you like wheat, you might not, need to worry about it preserving its color. So that might be a good option for drying in a greenhouse.
Gotcha. And is there a certain amount of time that flowers need to dry?
Yeah, it depends on the flower and depends on your location. So we are very fortunate. We're in a very hot, dry location, so almost ideal for drying. So things in the summer take about a week to dry for us. Right now, it's more like almost a month to dry something because it's not quite hot enough yet. So also just figuring out when your peak drying season is going to be. So you might know that your hottest season is between June and July, and that's when you're going to be doing the majority of your drying.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And on the cover of your book is a whole bunch of sunflowers, correct?
Yeah. That was such a fun shoot. We shot each season at the farm and in the wreath room. And so we went in the glossary in my one of my favorite parts of the book is this beautiful glossary where we go over all of the different flowers that we grow to dry. And then there's an opener for each season of the wreath room during that season. So that was summer. The cover is summer and very bright. You can sort of see all of the light coming in through the windows, and it's a beautiful scene. And yes, we grow a lot of different varieties of sunflowers, some that dry better than others. And we grow a variety called Vincent's Choice.
I love that one.
Yeah, that seems to dry really well. That's actually not the sunflower that's on the cover of the book, though.
Okay.
And the one that's on the cover of the book does dry well, but it doesn't dry as well as Vincent's Choice.
And so I was thinking because like sunflowers have really thin petals. Are the petals super fragile once they're dry?
They don't, especially with the Vincent's Choice, they don't seem to be very fragile. They kind of curl up and they turn this like almost gold that I just love. It's not actually like that bright yellow sunflower. It's almost a gold. And it's hard to use in a wreath because, sunflowers are large and their necks are very rigid. And so using those in wreaths can be tricky, but using them in dried mixed bouquets is really great.
That's wonderful. Thank you for those tips.
Yeah.
And for that story. You've mentioned several times the wreath room. Take us inside the wreath room. Tell us about it.
So it's about a 40 by 20 foot room, and it's tiled on the floor, and it's got exposed beams, and it's a very funky old wooden garage it predates when my parents bought the farm. And it actually has this big giant garage door that opens with a big spring. It was like before the invention of garage door apparatus. So it's a really weird, beautiful place. All we've done is just hang 20 or 14 gauge floral wire, or it's actually baling wire across the beams from eye hooks every foot or so across the entire building. And that's what we use to dry our flowers. And we just do it very simply. We attach them with rubber bands and then let them dry. It's usually a mess. Right now, it's a huge mess because we haven't quite started drying in full for the season. So it's a little bit of a mishmash of things from last year and things from this year. There's usually seeds all over the floor and bits and bobs and dried flowers and things that I can't seem to part with, like straw flower heads scattered all around. So it's a really beautiful spot. And like I said, one of my favorite places in this entire world. But it's also a very functional, very farm, real space.
That's amazing. It sounds like a really unique spot to be in.
Yeah.
So you literally have all of your dried flowers hanging from the ceiling.
Yes. Yep. They're all hanging from the ceiling. And then when we run out of room on the ceiling during like May and June, we also bring in the clothes drying racks that I was talking about. And last year we did have an overflow in the greenhouse as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a little crazy. I mean, it was beautiful. And we went through all of the flowers except for a bit of nigella is left from last year. So people are just loving it. They're loving the dried flowers. And I think one thing I wanted to mention in terms of the slow flower movement and local flowers is just that it's so sad to me that like during the fall and winter, for the most part, local flowers kind of go out the door because there isn't as many local flower options. And so for us, having a dried flower option is a really great way to keep our name and our brand in stores, but also keep people's interest in local flowers going throughout those slower seasons as well.
That's a great point. Yes. I always say when people ask me, what do you have blooming right now? I'm like, well, look outside. When it's the dead of winter, I have nothing, just like you. But that's always been a goal of mine to be able to build up my dried flowers. So I'm really looking forward to getting your book so that I can glean some information and hopefully expand my dried flowers. I grew nigella for the first time this last year.
Yeah.
And I did dry that one. And I really love it. There's just so many great dried flowers. Do you have a favorite dried flower?
Oh boy. I love straw flower. There's just something about it that's just really versatile. It's so easy to use in dried mixed bouquets, but also makes a perfect gift if it's just, a straight bunch of straw flower in a beautiful color. And then it also is just so fun to work with in wreaths and add such a great focal pop. I also have a huge soft spot for celosia. And we grow, because we're so hot, we grow a lot of it. And the variety and just like the colors and the velvety texture is just one of my favorites.
Now I have a question with both of those. I really like drying both of those. They both have little leaves like up and down the stems. When you're drying them, do you leave those leaves on or do you have to completely strip the stems to dry them?
We strip everything about halfway up the stem. We're not stripping them completely, but we're stripping them probably about halfway up the stem just to make it so that the rubber bands, there's not moisture where the rubber bands are being attached to the bundle. It helps with the drying process and helps make those stems not turn like that sort of funky brown color.
And then you leave them after it's dry on there.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I know some folks are a little bit more particular about their stems being completely clean, but we're too big of a farm to try to worry about that for each one.
To be honest, I think that's one of the things that's kept me from doing more is just the amount of time consuming little things. So knowing that I don't have to take off all of those leaves feels really freeing to think, I could take those and dry them.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the greatest things about dried flowers too is just you don't have the same time constraint that you do with fresh flowers. Like fresh flowers, you're harvesting first thing in the morning before it gets hot. And, you want them to be at that like peak sort of closed stage. But with dried flowers, you really have a little bit more flexibility about when you're harvesting during the day, as long as you're hanging them sort of right away. And then also just you catch them at a different point when they're more open, more mature. So it's a great balance. And also just sort of experimenting with things that you don't sell or things that come back from a farmer's market as well. So we've actually started drying a lot of our mixed bouquets if they come back from a farmer's market, because we can find that we can use them as a dried mixed bouquet. And that's a lot of, we grow a lot of things that work as dried flowers and fresh flowers like statice, and safflower as well.
I love that. That's such a great idea because I did a pop-up this last weekend. And of course, you always want to bring enough that at the end you're not short.
Exactly.
But then you have those that they've been out of water, they've been in the sun and the heat. Well, not out of water, but they've been out of the cooler.
Yeah.
And so then you can't resell them again. But if you could dry them,
it's giving things a new life. And we really look at our dried flowers as like a value added product. So we're taking something that may not have otherwise had as much of a value and adding value to it. So it's a great way to be a little bit more mindful and sustainable about those things that you may have otherwise, discarded or composted or given away.
I love that. Okay, we're coming off of tulip and daffodil season. Yeah. Have you ever dried tulips or daffodils?
We experimented this year with drying some double tulips and double daffodils, actually. The daffodils, I think, dry beautifully. They're a little crumbly. I think it will take a little bit more experimenting with. I think yellows often dry better than white. And then with the tulips, we did dry some. They're very crumbly as well. We'll see after we rehydrate them how they do. I think that certain things just tend to shed their petals more than others. Tulips are one of those things where you'd think that they'd be such a beautiful dried flower, but unfortunately, I think they just tend to shed their petals a little bit too much.
Yeah, I accidentally left one out 2 nights ago, and I just found it this morning, and it was pretty dried up and shriveled. So I was thinking, I wonder if it could dry, or if it would just, because it really shriveled up compared to some dried flowers that just start to harden.
Yeah, the other thing that I've noticed is we have some that are drying, and because those stems are so thick and so like filled with water and moisture, it takes a really long time for them to fully dry. And so just to be double checking when your dried flower is, when you think it's done, to really make sure that neck is actually all the way dry, or else you're going to be putting things away that have a tendency to mold.
Okay. And what about stage of harvest? How important is it to harvest at a certain stage?
I think it's very important. And that's why I try to go over in the book, examples for when we harvest each thing and little tips of the trade, because again, it's a lot of trial and error and figuring out what stage you like things at. And then also just, knowing that there are a little bit of tricks to each thing.
Okay. So in the book, we can read about each variety of flowers. You break it down by variety.
Yes, I actually break it down into focal flowers, greens and grasses, and foliage and filler. And then I go over each of those things for each season.
Oh, that's amazing. So I have to ask, my favorite flower is a dahlia. Can I dry my dahlias?
You can try. We don't grow dahlias. They don't love our water. I think we have too much salt or boron in our water. So unfortunately, we don't have much luck with it, but I know folks that do dry them. And I think similar to a tulip, you want to just catch them at that right stage and then just make sure that those stems are fully dried, because they are pretty thick.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what if I harvest at the beginning of the week and I have a cooler full of flowers by the end of the week that I haven't sold? Can I take those out of the cooler and dry them, or do they need to come straight from the field?
You can take them out of the cooler. The stems, I would give them a new recut. and actually cut them above where they were in water, just so that that moisture doesn't continue on while you're trying to dry. But yeah, things that have been in the cooler, we will often, if we have too much of something, we'll try drying it. But definitely cut those stems again above the water line.
So, what do you do with your dried flowers once they're dried? Are you wholesaling them, retailing them, sending them in your CSAs? What's your outlet for dried flowers?
It's a little mixture of both, or all actually. We started off doing mostly wholesale wreaths and direct to consumer wreaths, so at our farmers markets. And that's been really wonderful for us. The wholesale market is really tricky because you aren't able to get that, the price markup that you might need in order to really make a profit off of dried flowers. So the majority of our dried flowers and wreaths go to farmers markets, where we have a really loyal customer base, where we have been, sending these wreaths to the farmers markets for the last 40 years, and people love gifting them. And so they come back year after year to gift wreaths as their holiday gift. We also have a CSA add-on of dried flowers and dried wreaths in the wintertime as well.
Oh, that's amazing. What about if someone lives away from you? Can they go online and order one of your wreaths or dried bouquets?
Unfortunately, not, for a couple of different reasons. One is we are very supportive of our local industry. And so we want our flowers to stay as local as possible, including dried flowers. So while it's very tempting to ship our dried flowers, I think we have a really amazing customer base that's local, and we kind of want to give them first priority. Um, and another reason is that we don't really have the quantity that is required for that whole process. And so we've thought about definitely ramping up our production, but that's a whole nother ball game. And our farm, while it's big, it's actually still pretty small in our whole managerial team. So trying to think of adding an entire shipping department is a little bit terrifying, to be honest.
I can understand that. I ship dahlias for about 2.5, 3 weeks a year.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
feel like I become my own shipping department. And sometimes I think, oh, I need a team for this because it's so labor intensive.
Totally.
And so people that are listening that want dried flowers, can we recommend that they search like localflowers.org and go find some dried flowers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know Charles, I'm going to just tout them one more time. Charles Little and Company does ship, and they have beautiful dried flowers. So if you're interested in a really great company that ships local flowers, that is one of them. But yeah, definitely experiment with, researching the growers in your area and seeing if anybody grows dried flowers, or try experimenting growing your own.
Perfect. What else can our listeners find in your book, or what do you want to highlight that I maybe haven't asked you about your book?
Oh my goodness. I think that, so the designs are really wonderful. I am so proud of them. It took 2 years of arranging, and we make our wreaths in a really unique way. And we have some amazing artists here, our flower team. And I highlight all of their different personalities and also their different ways of making wreaths. So I try to honor them and all of their artistry as well. So I wanted to highlight that. And then also just the fact that I do have an amazing tutorial in the book on how we make our wreaths. So if you're interested in learning how we get our really full, really thick based wreaths, I go over all of that in the book. I think and then also just that the book is really for everyone. It has a little bit of something for somebody who's never dried flowers, that wants to experiment with, designing just a few in their home. And then the last sort of section is celebration. So it's really big, grand gestures like arches, and sort of exploring the grander things that you can create with dried flowers as well.
Amazing. So whether you're a backyard gardener or a farmer florist or even a florist, you can gather ideas and inspiration from your book.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited to get my copy and try drying some more flowers this year. I've been very specific with getting some more Dusty Miller and Status to dry because those are some of my favorites. So where can people find your book?
It's now available for pre-order, and it's should be available anywhere that books are sold. If you like a local bookstore, feel free to go inside and you can ask them to order it or for them to hold it in their store. Should be available anywhere online that books are sold.
That is amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
A great experience and opportunity. And I know that so many people are going to be excited to pick up a copy of your book. Besides grabbing a copy of your book, where can our listeners find you?
I run our 3 social media accounts for Full Belly Farm. So I run the Full Belly Farm Instagram, which is full_belly_farm. And then I run my own personal, more floral-filled journey at Full Belly Farm, which is Farmer Hands on Instagram. And then I have one that's dedicated specifically to the wreath room and drying flowers. That's just the wreath room at Full Belly, wreath room on Instagram.
Perfect. I will provide links in the show notes so people can click directly over to each of those different accounts.
Yeah. And then our website is fullbellyfarm.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah, for sharing those. Before we say goodbye today, do you have any parting wisdom or advice that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
I think just take a moment to realize that everything takes time and that flowers and flower farming and your flower journey will probably adapt and change over the course of your lifetime. And just to remember that it's a journey and things take a really long time. And we've been growing here for 40 years. It was not something that just instantly happened. Great things and especially floral-filled things take time.
I love it. That's a beautiful reminder. Well, Hannah, it's been such a delight chatting with you. Thank you for sharing your dried flower knowledge with us. And
thank you, Jennifer.
I'd love to leave the door open and ask you to come back on the podcast again, maybe when you're writing book number 2.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and happy gardening. Have a great day.
Yay.
Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of the Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.